Hey all, it's David Ducker coming back at you. Today we're going to be going over Return of the Runefangs, episode 16. Charles was supposed to be co-GMing this session, so I'm sorry about the way it turned out, Charles. It was supposed to be the party going out finally into the Black Mountains, tracking down the Thieves Guild they were searching for, hunting manticores perhaps. But and Charles had prepared this whole elaborate dungeon crawl for them that he was going to co-GM us through, doing the majority of the work, in fact. But as you'll see, they never left the city in this adventure. They politicked and role-played through the whole session without leaving the city. So Charles did get to run a couple of NPCs in role-play, but not many. So he's pretty much just sitting there for the whole session. So I'm sorry about the way it turned out there, Charles. It was a fun session for everyone else. But anyways, when we last left, our daring heroes, they have finally arrived in Grenzstadt, Forge of the Empire, and the warden of Blackfire Pass. Collectively, they are a warden, but they had been to dinner with the Baron and Baroness. They had politicked and talked a little. The dinner was interrupted by some holy knights, by light mage of the Light Order, a priestess of Shalias. All these white and gold garbed characters came in, contrasted with the members of House Richthofen. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what their house sigil is. I think it's a gray mountain under a golden sun. I could be wrong about that, though. Check out the Facebook group, Return of the Runefangs. Go into the notes section, and I'm sure it's listed there. I just can't remember it. Also, you can get all the NPC portraits and the maps as well. Actually, I did a very detailed map for Grenzstadt. Very cool, very detailed map. Got a waterfall and a castle and the temples. It's not up on the group yet because I have to scan it. It was all hand drawn. I couldn't find the official map, but it's a pretty high quality map. So I'll have to try to get that on Facebook. But anyways, back to the actual story. The players had politicked, they had dinner, they're interrupted by all these white knights and white wizards who were very rude to everyone else there. But the players didn't really know what's going on, like who's really in the wrong, who's really in the right. This is all, we're from down the road, so we don't know what's going on here, but there's a lot of tension in the room, very awkward. So they had all retired to bed. Now Donnie actually had snuck a note during dinner. He was the cupbearer, Sir Gregor, but he actually snuck a note to Dame Elizabetha Richthofen, to Gregor's paramour, a would-be paramour, to meet at the top of the waterfall. So we cut through to Donnie, now, and he's dressed different, he's walking different, he's carrying himself with all this confidence and swagger, whereas usually he's just this meek little squire. So we cut to him acting very unusual. He's standing at the top of the waterfall. There's a cliff, and there's like a secret cave that the waterfall's coming out of, but there's enough room to walk around in. And he's overlooking the whole city and the river and the valley and the bridge. Got this great panoramic view of Averland spreading out before him. And then Elizabetha, walks out of the cave. She's in full armor. She's wearing dwarf plate. Her helmet is fashioned like the head of a lioness. And she comes through, and she starts immediately, she's looking around. She thinks it's a trap. And she's asking him, like, how do you know about this place? Only members of House Richthofen know about this place. It's a secret location. And he runs right over. He's like, oh, don't worry about that. I came here to assess your skills, and I need to talk to you about potential black magic that's going on. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, assess my skills. Like, I am the only female knight of the Order of the Black Bear. I'm a dame who has slain a manticore. You know, no one needs to assess my skills. And he draws his sword and he lunges in at her, and they start dueling, and they're talking, and, you know, he's coming in saying, oh, well, so far you've been able to parry well enough, I suppose, but you're, you know, without your armor, I'm not sure what good you'd be. And he's like smacking her on the armor, and they're having this duel, and she's starting to win some respect in him. And he's starting to talk about how he's a witch hunter. He's on the trail of a black magician, and she starts asking, like, are you talking about our archmage, about Verena Sachs? Because I've heard dire rumors about her. And Donnie's just like, oh, no, not her. She's beyond reproach. I'm tracking a different black wizard. So he completely stonewalls that avenue, which was fun. And it made sense in character as well. But the players don't know why yet. But they're dueling, and eventually he runs out of stamina, essentially, in the system. So he can either just lose the duel, or he can allow her to wound him. And rather than lose the duel, he's like, I take a wound. So she stabs him for real. And he starts oozing blood. And she's like, oh my god! Like, well, why did you, you know? And then while she's distracted, he comes in, aha! And he stabs her and knocks her to the ground, and he jumps on top of her with his dagger, and, you know, she's forced to yield, and you know, she gets up and she's like, why did you do that? You let me stab you, and why didn't you just yield? And he's like bleeding. He's starting to get lightheaded, and he's like, I just didn't want to disappoint you. And she's like, you know, you're ridiculous. But they've been having this really charismatic like banter. Like, she's really warming up to him, and she actually takes him down into the city to get his wound seen to at the Temple of Shalia, where they have some healers. But he built a really good rapport up with her, and it was fairly obvious that he's trying to seduce her, basically, which is really funny considering he's undercover as the squire of the man who's in love with her. So that creates this disgusting love triangle if he's successful. So she's definitely warmed up to him. Now, of course, the Order of the Black Bear, though, they have to take vows of celibacy. And they discussed this. They were like, you know, why is Sir Gregor trying to court me when I've taken a vow of celibacy? The man is impossible to deal with. And Donnie is coming in like, I don't know why anyone would attempt to court you. But you're right, it doesn't make any sense. And they're kind of like teasing each other. But basically, Donnie came in and he showed that he's a macho man of action, even though he's not really, but he certainly appeared that way to her. Contrasted perfectly against Sir Gregor, who's just such a pansy, such a dandy. So really, you know, he saw what wasn't working, and he went the other way to seduce her, and it's actually working very well. So that was a nice little role-playing scene, and we got to do some stuff with the combat as well. A very heavily armored person can't dodge, but doesn't care if she gets hit, versus a very lightly armored person who's really good at dodging. So really interesting combat mechanically. And of course, Josh, who plays Donnie, came in and described his fighting style. He said it's like high scorpion style. So he's got his buckler out in front of him. He's got his sword pulled up over his head, so it's hanging down like a scorpion tail. So he put a lot of work into that, and it was really fun. And then meanwhile, back in the castle, Ulrich is tossing and turning in his bed. He can't sleep. He keeps thinking about what the priestess said to him, Lydia Rebeck, what she said to him about Shalia healing his face, so he doesn't have to wear this veil anymore, so he can, perhaps reestablish some of those romantic relationships that have been broken off after his injury. And so he gets up in the middle of the night, he sneaks out of the castle into the city, and he goes to the temple of Shalia to see her, and they have this conversation. Like, she obviously wants to help him, and she's trying to find a way for Shalia to help him. And she's talking about how if he really commits to the principles of Shalia, he can be healed. And he's like agreeing. He's like, yes, I can commit to pacifism and to kindness and to forgiveness. And he's telling her all these things that he's never ever done in the past. Like, he's been completely ruthless. He's killed people. He's tortured people. His first course of action is violence. So all the players, the audience knows he's lying to this priestess, and she takes him in, and she's convinced, though she doesn't know any better. So she gets him kneeling at this basin of water, and it's got a statue of Shalia at the other end, and the basin is fed by the tears of the statue. And he's kneeling and she's standing. She puts her hand on the back of his head, and she does a prayer to Shalia. And we described the prayer, exactly what she said, and the doctrine of Shalia. And then she plunged his face into the healing waters. And we did this whole aside scene about how he felt this other presence come to him, and even though it was only a second in the real time, he experienced this out of body sensation. He felt this other presence come before him and search his soul, and then turn his back on him. And when when Shalia turned her back on him and left, he was left there, kind of in limbo. And this other presence came and searched his soul, and it was so different. Instead of this kind, gentle probing, it was this violent, forceful ransacking of his soul, and it reached out and touched his wound, and instead of healing it and taking the wound away, it ripped his whole face open. And so all this happened like in limbo. It only happened in 1 second, but so when he wakes up and he's on the floor, gasping, the floor of the temple, there's steam coming off of him, and the basin of water is shattered, and there's water running all over the floor. The priestess is screaming and holding her eyes and crying, and he feels his face, and his whole lower jaw is a skeleton. So he like stands up and he's like, "What's happened to me? What's happened?" And he's screaming, and all of the temple guards come running up, and all the other priests, and they're like, "Oh my God!" And they're all like recoiling before him, and he's like in this circle of people, and they're all looking at him, and they start to realize what's happened, and they all just look on him like, "Oh, you poor man, you poor creature. Look what's happened to you." And there's all this pity pouring out of them into him, and he's just disgusted by it. And he pushes his way out, and he smashes a statue of Shalia on his way out. He tears down a banner of Shalia, and he rushes out into the streets. Because, well, of course, what's happened is when Shalia turned her back, Tzinch came in, the chaos god of change, and he changed him, not in a way that he desired. But really great scene. We're really going to have big repercussions with Ulrich in the future. And Ulrich's player, Mike, was really shocked. Like, he knew the prayer wouldn't be answered. He knew he was lying to the goddess, and she would be able to tell. He didn't expect for there to be repercussions. But there were, and they were dire. So really great scene with him. And then we cut through to like the next morning, where everyone showed up to see them off. Ulrich's locked in his room; he won't come out. But everyone else is going through their mourning. Gregor pledges to Elizabetha to return and prove his love to her and prove that he's worthy. And Ulrich Donnie standing behind him as his squire, and Elizabetha is like, of course, there, but she's not looking at Sir Gregor. She's looking at Donnie. So there's this horrible love triangle forming there, and someone's vows will be broken, I'm sure. But that was a good scene. And Sir Blaine had a good scene with Baron Christoph Richthofen, the young Baron, about where he was telling him over breakfast all about his campaigns against the vampires, and the Baron got really excited, and he really wants to commit the forces of House Richthofen to the crusade, but of course his Baroness would frown on that, and she's really the one who wears the pants in the relationship. So that was an interesting dynamic, but he certainly won over the young Baron. So that was interesting. Good role playing from Kevin, who plays Blaine, and everyone kind of assembled out in the courtyard, and finally Ulrich came down. And he's brooding. He just gets on his horse and he rides off. So the rest of the party comes out and they ride out as well. And as they're riding out, they see the valley actually has a small camp of Knights of the Blazing Sun, which wasn't there before. So they start to ride forward to see what's going on with the Knights of the Blazing Sun there, the Order. But that's where we're going to leave off for right now. So tune in. Not next week. I might post this at any time. Just keep checking. Or subscribe, perhaps. But next we'll be looking at episode 17, Return of the Runefangs. Everybody have a good day, though. Cheers.